People first noticed the shed in early autumn. Wooden beams rose around the small house slowly. It looked like a box being built around another box. Neighbors stopped during walks and laughed openly. They said he was wasting time and money. They said rain and snow would find a way in. The man inside the house was named Samuel. He lived alone at the edge of the village. He spoke little and listened more than most. Years of quiet work had shaped his habits. He did not argue or explain his plans. He simply kept building with calm focus. Samuel had learned patience from hard winters. In the past he lost firewood to rain and rot. Wet logs smoked and refused to burn well. Cold nights became long and uncomfortable. He promised himself that would never happen again. Preparation became more important than appearance. The shed was not meant to impress anyone. It was built to block wind and driving rain. A roof extended beyond the house walls. Sides left space for air to move slowly. Firewood stacks lined the dry outer ring. Each log placed with care and order. Neighbors continued to joke as weeks passed. They said the house looked trapped and hidden. Some said it would grow mold and decay. Others said snow would collapse the roof. Samuel heard the words carried by the wind. He kept measuring, cutting, and sealing quietly. Autumn rains arrived heavy and cold. Water soaked fields and turned paths to mud. Wood piles across the village darkened quickly. People rushed to cover logs with torn sheets. Samuel watched rain slide off the shed roof. Inside, the space stayed dry and calm. He stacked firewood methodically each evening. Logs rested raised from the ground. Air flowed gently between rows. No damp smell filled the space. The shed blocked sudden gusts and splashes. Samuel smiled quietly at the simple success. As days shortened, the village grew busier. People worried about fuel and winter stores. Prices climbed and tempers shortened. Samuel stayed focused on small details. He sealed joints and reinforced corners. Every nail served a purpose. Children passing by dared each other to touch it. They knocked on the wooden walls and laughed. Parents pulled them along shaking heads. They called the structure strange and unnecessary. Samuel never chased them away. He believed time would answer better than words. The first frost came early one morning. Grass turned white and brittle. Breath hung thick in the air. Samuel checked his firewood supply carefully. Each log felt solid and dry. He knew warmth would come easily tonight. In other homes, fires struggled to catch. Damp wood hissed and smoked. People complained about wasted fuel. Some blamed weather, others blamed suppliers. No one blamed preparation yet. That lesson had not arrived. Samuel lit his stove calmly. Flames caught quickly and burned steady. The room filled with clean, warm air. No smoke lingered or stung eyes. He sat back and listened to the fire, grateful for simple foresight. Winter approached steadily without drama. Snow fell lightly at first, then heavier. Roofs creaked under growing weight. Paths disappeared beneath white layers. Samuel cleared the shed roof regularly, keeping airflow and balance in mind. Neighbors watched him shovel around the structure. They asked casual questions masked as jokes. Why build so much just for wood? Why not use a tarp like everyone else? Samuel answered kindly without lecturing. He spoke of dryness and airflow. Some shrugged and walked away unconvinced. Others paused and thought quietly. Doubt lingered, but curiosity had started. The shed no longer looked entirely foolish. It looked solid against rising snow. Still no one admitted it aloud. A heavy storm arrived one dark night. Wind pushed snow sideways across fields. Roofs leaked and doors froze shut. Firewood piles disappeared under wet layers. Samuel checked his shed once more. Inside, nothing had changed. The fire burned steady through the night. Logs cracked softly with clean heat. Samuel slept well despite the storm. Outside wind raged without mercy. Inside warmth stayed even and calm. Preparation held firm against chaos. Morning revealed the storm's damage. Several sheds collapsed under snow. Wet wood piles slumped and soaked. People struggled to light fires. Smoke filled rooms and tempers flared. Cold felt sharper than before. Someone noticed smoke from Samuel's chimney, thin and steady against the gray sky. Curiosity replaced laughter slowly. A neighbor stopped by with stiff hands. He asked how the wood stayed dry. Samuel invited him to look. Inside the shed air felt different. Dry, calm, and protected. Logs looked fresh despite the storm. The neighbor ran a hand over the wood. Surprise crossed his face quietly. He said little but remembered much. Word traveled slowly through the village. Not loud enough to be gossip yet. Just careful observations shared by necessity. Samuel noticed more people passing by. They looked longer and spoke less. Winter was teaching its lesson. Days grew colder and nights longer. Storms came one after another. Firewood became the most discussed topic. Some people ran out earlier than planned. Samuel's stacks remained full and ready. His routine stayed unchanged and calm. One evening a family knocked on his door. Their fire had failed and wood soaked through. Samuel shared dry logs without hesitation. He asked nothing in return. Warmth spread beyond his own walls. Trust began to grow quietly. The shed no longer seemed strange. It became something people studied. They noticed how rain never reached the wood. How snow slid cleanly off the roof. How space allowed air to move. Simple design proving powerful. Samuel never claimed he was right. He only said preparation matters. The shed was not clever. It was respectful of weather and time. Nature rewards those who listen. Winter reveals what truly works. By midwinter laughter had faded completely. In its place stood quiet respect. People waved instead of joking now. They asked real questions and took notes. Samuel shared freely without pride. Knowledge warmed more than fire. The shed stood firm through every storm, protecting not just wood but peace of mind. Samuel watched smoke rise steadily each day. He felt no need to explain anymore. The structure spoke clearly on its own. Winter was far from over, but proof had arrived. Winter settled fully over the village. Snow no longer came in light falls. It arrived heavy and stayed for days. Roads narrowed and roofs grew thick with white. People moved slower and spoke less. Cold shaped every decision they made. Samuel kept his routine steady and calm. Each morning he cleared snow from the shed roof. He checked airflow paths and door seals. The space between house and shed stayed dry. Firewood rested untouched by moisture. Order brought him quiet confidence. Across the village problems grew louder. Wet wood burned poorly and filled rooms with smoke. Some families argued over fuel use. Others rationed warmth and wore layers indoors. Cold nights felt longer than before. Patience wore thin under freezing air. People began watching Samuel more closely. They noticed his chimney smoke stayed light. It rose steady even during storms. They noticed he never rushed for supplies. His movements showed no panic or strain. Preparation had given him control. One afternoon a neighbor named Thomas arrived. He carried a bundle of damp logs. His hands shook from cold and frustration. He admitted his tarp had failed again. Samuel listened without judgment, then led him to the shed. Inside the air felt different immediately. Dry, calm, and protected from wind. Samuel showed how wood was stacked off ground. How space allowed air to move gently. Thomas touched the logs in disbelief. They felt warm and ready to burn. Samuel explained in simple words. Rain needs wind to reach deep spaces. The shed blocked both together. The air gap worked like a shield. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. Just respect for how weather moves. Thomas left carrying dry firewood. His face showed relief and understanding. That evening his home filled with clean warmth. He shared the story with others quietly. Not as praise but as truth. The shed began changing minds. Soon more neighbors came by. Some with curiosity, some with need. Samuel welcomed all without pride. He answered questions and demonstrated methods. He never spoke as a teacher, only as someone who had learned. People began making small changes. Extra boards added to old sheds. Firewood lifted higher from wet ground. Roofs extended a little further. Results came quickly and clearly. Warmth improved even in harsh weather. The village mood slowly shifted. Complaints gave way to problem-solving. People shared tips instead of blame. They checked each other's stacks and shelters. Community replaced isolation bit by bit. Cold no longer felt like an enemy. Samuel noticed children playing near the shed. They watched snow slide cleanly off the roof. They asked why it did not pile up. Samuel explained slope and gravity. They listened with bright curiosity. Learning felt natural and easy. One evening the village head visited. He had once laughed the loudest. Now his tone carried respect. He asked about building a shared wood shelter for families struggling the most. Samuel agreed without hesitation. Plans were drawn using simple tools. Nothing complex, nothing costly. People donated spare boards and time. Work began even in cold air. Hands moved faster when hope returned. Shared effort warmed everyone involved. The shelter rose near the common path, designed with airflow and coverage in mind. Firewood stored there stayed dry and ready. Families used it during storms. Trust in preparation grew stronger. The shed idea had spread fully. Samuel stayed mostly in the background. He preferred watching others succeed, seeing ideas grow beyond his own walls. That brought him deeper satisfaction. The shed had done its job. Now people carried the lesson forward. Storms continued to test the village, but damage decreased each time. Wet wood became less common. Fires burned cleaner and longer. Homes felt more comfortable inside. Winter lost its grip on morale. One night a powerful storm hit again. Wind howled and snow piled deep. Samuel checked his shed calmly. Everything held steady and dry. He slept soundly through the night. Confidence replaced fear completely. Morning brought quiet skies, and a village that felt different. People stepped outside without dread. Smoke rose evenly from many chimneys. Warmth spread beyond one home. Preparation had changed everything. Neighbors no longer joked about the shed. They studied it with genuine interest. Some planned to build their own in spring. Others adjusted what they already had. Samuel offered help when asked. Knowledge flowed freely now. As winter moved past its harshest weeks, the village stood stronger than before. Not because cold had eased, but because understanding had grown. Samuel's simple shed proved one truth. Dry would mean steady warmth and peace. By late winter the village had changed its rhythm. Mornings started with checks instead of complaints. People looked at roofs, paths, and wood stacks carefully. Cold was still present, but no longer frightening. Preparation had become part of daily life. Confidence grew with every steady fire. Samuel noticed the shift quietly. He walked through the village more often now. People greeted him with nods and smiles. Some stopped him to share small successes. Dry wood, clean fires, warmer rooms. Proof spread faster than doubt ever had. One afternoon, a woman named Clara came. She lived near the river where damp air lingered. Her firewood spoiled faster than anyone else's. She admitted she once laughed the loudest. Now she asked for help openly. Samuel followed her without judgment. They stood beside her soaked wood pile. Samuel pointed out ground moisture and wind flow. He explained how water travels unseen. They discussed simple raised platforms and cover. Nothing costly, nothing difficult. Just careful placement and patience. Within days Clara rebuilt her storage. Using spare boards and old roofing sheets. The design followed what she had learned. Air moved freely while rain stayed out. When she lit her fire that night, tears came quietly with relief. Her neighbors noticed quickly. They felt the warmth when visiting her home. Word spread again, not through talk, but through shared experience and proof. Samuel watched the lesson repeat itself, each time stronger than before. The village school invited Samuel again. This time older students gathered. They wanted to understand practical science. Not from books but from real life. Samuel brought small models and drawings. He spoke slowly using simple ideas. He showed how water moves with wind. How air trapped stays warm longer. How dryness decides fire strength. Students asked thoughtful questions eagerly. They began seeing homes as systems, not just walls and roofs. Teachers later noticed changes. Students talked about building and planning. They helped parents adjust storage spaces. Learning crossed from classroom to home. Samuel felt proud without seeking credit. Knowledge had found good ground. As spring crept closer, snow softened. Ice melted during midday sun. People began planning for next winter already. They did not wait for fear to return. Lists were made and materials saved. The shed idea shaped future thinking. Samuel began documenting his process. He wrote notes in clear basic language, step by step, simple and honest. He included mistakes and lessons learned. He believed truth builds trust, not perfection or pride. One evening the village gathered again, this time not in crisis. They shared food and warm stories. People spoke about how winter felt different. Less desperate, more manageable. Samuel listened quietly from the side. Someone asked him why he stayed silent so long. Why he did not defend his idea earlier. Samuel answered calmly and honestly. People hear better when ready. Proof speaks louder than explanation. Time teaches what words cannot. As days grew longer the shed stood unchanged. Still protecting the house within. Still blocking wind and rain. Now it felt familiar and respected. Children no longer laughed at it. They pointed and explained its purpose proudly. Visitors from nearby villages began arriving. They heard about the dry firewood winter. They asked questions and took notes. Samuel welcomed them kindly. He never claimed ownership of the idea. He shared it freely as knowledge. Some visitors stayed skeptical at first. But once they touched dry wood in winter, doubt softened quickly. They returned home carrying new plans. The lesson traveled beyond the village. Like warmth moving from one fire to another. Samuel realized then the true impact. The shed was never just for him. It was a starting point. A simple answer waiting to spread. Prepared minds carry ideas further than any single structure ever could. Spring arrived fully one clear morning. Snow retreated and ground reappeared. The village felt lighter and hopeful. Damage was less than past years. Firewood remained in good supply. Confidence carried into warmer days. People began repairing and improving shelters. They adjusted designs while weather was gentle. Samuel helped where needed. But often people managed on their own. The knowledge had settled deeply. Guiding hands without constant instruction. One afternoon Samuel stood beside his shed. Sunlight warmed the wood panels softly. He remembered the first laughs and jokes. They felt distant and harmless now. What mattered was the result. Dry wood, steady warmth, shared strength. He understood something important then. Real change does not demand attention. It grows quietly through consistency. Preparedness earns respect over time. The shed had taught that lesson well. And winter had been the final proof. Spring settled fully across the village. Snow disappeared from roofs and paths. Earth softened and new sounds returned. People worked outdoors with lighter hearts. Winter felt distant but not forgotten. Lessons from the cold stayed fresh. Samuel continued his quiet routines. He repaired small parts of the shed, replaced boards worn by storms. He believed care never truly ends. Maintenance mattered as much as design. Preparation was a year-round practice. Neighbors now stopped to talk openly. They shared plans for improving storage. Some wanted to rebuild sheds entirely. Others aimed to improve what existed. Samuel listened and offered guidance, but never pushed his ideas forcefully. A meeting was called at the community hall, not because of crisis this time, but to plan for the future. People discussed shared storage and safety. They wanted the village ready for anything. Samuel sat among them, not above them. The village head spoke with humility. He admitted old mistakes openly. He thanked Samuel for patience and example. The room responded with quiet agreement. Respect filled the space naturally. No one needed applause. Plans were made for a larger shared shed, one that could store firewood for emergencies. Designed with airflow and weather in mind. Built slowly with shared effort. The goal was security, not pride. Preparedness for all, not just some. Construction began during warm days. Hands worked easily without cold pressure. Older villagers taught younger ones. Skills passed naturally between generations. Samuel guided but did not lead. The knowledge now belonged to everyone. As the shed took shape, people noticed how much confidence had grown. They no longer feared harsh seasons. They trusted their ability to adapt. Winter was no longer an enemy. It was a challenge they understood. Children played around the new structure. They copied the curved angles with sticks. They talked about air and rain, using words they learned naturally. Preparedness had become part of culture, not just a reaction to fear. Samuel watched this with quiet satisfaction. He never imagined such reach, all from one simple decision: to protect firewood from weather. The smallest problems often teach the biggest lessons. If someone pays attention. Visitors continued arriving through summer. Some stayed for days to learn. Others returned home inspired. The story traveled far beyond the village. Not as legend but as example. Simple preparation making real difference. Samuel was offered chances to leave. Workshops, talks, and distant projects. He declined politely each time. His place was here, among results. Where ideas lived, not just spoken. Roots mattered more than recognition. As autumn approached again, people prepared earlier than ever before. Firewood was cut, stacked, and covered. Sheds repaired and improved carefully. No one waited for cold warnings. They trusted experience now. The first cold night returned quietly. No panic followed. Fires lit easily across the village. Dry wood burned clean and steady. Smoke rose gently from many chimneys. Warmth spread evenly everywhere. Samuel stood beside his shed once more, listening to familiar sounds. Crackling fire, distant voices. The structure no longer felt strange. It felt like part of the land, as natural as the seasons themselves. Neighbors passed by and nodded warmly. Some smiled, remembering past laughter. There was no shame left in it. Only shared growth and understanding. Mistakes had led to wisdom. and wisdom brought unity. Winter returned with strength again. But this time it found readiness. Wood stayed, dry storms met resistance. People helped each other without hesitation. Fear no longer ruled decisions. Knowledge stood in its place. The shed around Samuel's house remained simple. Wood weathered by time and seasons. Yet its purpose stayed strong. It protected not just firewood, but a lesson learned by many. Preparation earns peace. Samuel realized then what truly mattered. Not the shed itself, but the patience to trust an idea. Even when others laughed, time had proven the truth gently, and winter had done the teaching. The village thrived through another cold season. Steady, warm, and confident. No one laughed at preparation anymore. They respected it deeply. The shed that once drew jokes had quietly changed everything. Years moved forward without loud change. The village grew steadier with each season. People no longer rushed when weather shifted. They planned calmly and worked together. Preparedness became part of daily thinking. Winter was respected, not feared. Samuel aged quietly among familiar paths. His steps slowed, but his habits stayed strong. He still checked sheds, roofs, and airflow. Still walked the land at sunrise. Learning never left him. Curiosity kept his mind sharp. The shed around his house still stood firm. Wood darkened with time and weather, but its purpose remained unchanged. Firewood stayed dry season after season. The space protected warmth and effort. A simple idea holding steady value. Children who once laughed had grown older. They now explained the design to visitors. Using confident, clear words. They spoke of air, rain, and patience. What began as mockery became pride. Knowledge had taken root deeply. One winter arrived harsher than any before. Storms stacked upon storms without pause. News from nearby areas spoke of struggle, power loss, and soaked fuel. The village remained calm and prepared. Shared sheds opened without delay. Travelers arrived seeking relief. Cold, worn faces and tired hands. They were welcomed without judgment. Warmth was offered freely. Dry wood burned clean and strong. Community answered where fear once lived. Some travelers asked about the sheds. Why this village endured so well. People pointed not to Samuel alone, but to shared learning and patience. The shed had sparked change. The people had carried it forward. Samuel watched quietly from his doorway. Smoke rose steady into gray skies. He felt no pride or need for credit. Only quiet satisfaction. The work had grown beyond him. That was how it should be. A gathering was held one evening. Not to celebrate survival, but to reflect and plan ahead. People spoke of future storms, of helping others prepare. The lesson was no longer local. Samuel was asked to speak briefly. He stood slowly and looked around. Familiar faces filled the room. He spoke in simple, calm words. Preparation is kindness given early. It saves worry later. No applause followed. It was not needed. Everyone understood the truth. They had lived it themselves. Warmth is built before winter, not begged for during it. As years passed, Samuel grew quieter. He spent more time walking and writing, leaving notes for those who asked. Clear, simple steps and observations. He believed knowledge should remain accessible. Long after he was gone. One spring morning Samuel did not rise early. Neighbors noticed his door stayed closed. Concern brought gentle knocking. They found him resting peacefully. His life complete and steady. Like the shelter he built. The village mourned without despair. They remembered him through action. Maintaining sheds, sharing knowledge. Teaching children preparation and patience. His presence remained in every warm room, every dry stack of wood. The shed around his house stayed untouched, maintained with care and respect. It became a quiet reference, not a monument, just proof of thoughtful living. Still doing its job. Visitors continued coming over the years. They touched the dry wood with wonder. They asked how it all began. Villagers told the story simply. A man prepared while others laughed. Winter taught the rest. The village thrived through many seasons. Not rich, not famous, but ready and confident. People trusted effort over hope, learning over habit, preparation over panic. Every winter smoke rose evenly, from many chimneys, not just one. Dry wood burned clean and bright. Warmth stayed steady inside homes. Fear had lost its place. Knowledge had replaced it fully. The shed that once drew laughter, now blended into the land. Quiet, useful, and respected. It never needed praise. It held what mattered most. Dry wood, steady warmth and peace.